welcome to Geek Cross, the podcast where faith and culture intersect. I am your host, Jeremy Yoder, and on each episode we look at a topic related to pop culture or geekdom and have conversations that use science fiction, fantasy, gaming, or comic books as a jumping off point to talk about deeper issues and wrestle with the big questions of life. A few weeks ago, on February 27th, legendary actor Leonard Nimoy passed away at the age of 83. Now, as you probably all know, Nimoy is the actor behind Mr. Spock, probably one of the most important central characters of science fiction in the past 50 years. And now Nimoy is not the first actor of the original cast to pass away. DeForest Kelley passed away in 1999 and James Doohan in 2005. But Nimoy's death has brought out an outpouring of grief and an outpouring of tribute. And so this episode of Geek Cross, we're also going to pay tribute to Leonard Nimoy and talk a little about the character Mr. Spock and what he represents as an outsider in Star Trek. Now, I think one of the reasons why there has been such an outpouring of grief is that of the three main characters from the original series, Kirk, McCoy, and Spock, the Vulcan science officer is the one that many of us connected with the most. Captain Kirk was the adventurer, the dashing leading man, the risk-taker, and McCoy was the cynic, the skeptic, and the realist. But Spock was the anchor of this threesome, of this trinity, if you will. He was the voice of reason, the quiet observer, the wise one, the one who could figure out and explain the weird science stuff that nobody else could understand. In the context of the civil rights movement and the changes that were happening in the United States at the time, Spock was a pioneer. At a time when many mainstream audiences were dealing with the question of race for the first time, Spock represented a mixed race character, an other, if you will, that many could identify with. And in that respect, is an extraordinary character that broke through some of the boundaries and some of the walls that had been erected. One of the things that's really interesting about Spock is how Leonard Nimoy's Jewishness played a role in the character. Nimoy was the son of Ukrainian Jewish immigrants. He was raised as an Orthodox Jew, and he attended services with his grandfather at Boston synagogues. And as been documented by the Wexler Oral History Project, and you can find a clip of this on YouTube, Nimoy based the famous Vulcan salute on the priestly blessing of the Kohanim. I apologize for that pronunciation. I'm not Jewish. I don't speak Hebrew. But this symbol, this famous V-shaped salute, is actually the representation of the letter Shin in the Hebrew alphabet. And the letter Shin is the first letter of names and concepts like El Shaddai, which means Almighty God, Shalom, which means peace, prosperity, and Shekinah, which is the divine dwelling of God. And some believe represents the feminine attributes of the presence of God. And so when developing Vulcan culture, and the symbols and the rituals of Vulcan culture, Nimoy drew from his childhood, his religious childhood, as an Orthodox Jew. And this symbol, this V-shaped salute, took off in a way that he did not anticipate, or anyone else anticipated. And so there is something, I think, beautiful and wonderful about the fact that there are all these Star Trek fans walking around, blessing each other, giving each other a priestly blessing without realizing it at all. Now, I'm not arguing that Spock is a Jewish character or that he's intended to be a stand-in for Judaism, but rather that Leonard Nimoy's experiences of being an other, of being Jewish in a Gentile world, of being the child of immigrants, shaped the character of Spock. And in some ways, because Spock is an alien and not a particular ethnic group or race, he becomes a kind of stand-in for all of us who experience otherness, who are different from those around us. One of the dynamics about Spock is that there is a loneliness to this character. He is alienated from his home culture. He is half Vulcan, half human. One of the tropes of the original series is Spock's struggling with his humanness, his humanity, that sometimes his emotions, which he has buried away, emerge. For example, there was an episode in the first season, episode 4, called The Naked Time, where Spock, along most of the Enterprise crew, is infected by an illness that destroys one's inhibitions. And as he's infected, Spock tries to keep his emotions in check, and he breaks into tears, sobbing, reminding himself of his duty, counting, trying to get it back in check. It's really one of my favorite pieces of Nimoy's acting. But Spock is a torn character struggling between the different halves of his identity. He's also alienated from his father, Ambassador Sarek, because of his career choices, because he works for Starfleet. And he's rejected by T'Pring, who is a female Vulcan that he was arranged to marry, even though he doesn't want her either. This is in the episode Amok Time. This theme of loneliness is expounded in J.J. Abrams' 2009 reboot, when the Romulan Nero destroys Vulcan, leaving Spock as one of the few last remaining Vulcans spread out across the galaxy. I think loneliness is one of the most interesting themes in science fiction. Often the characters in science fiction, the ones that we connect to the most, are outsiders, are misfits, are ones who don't fit in society. Joss Whedon, of course, created an entire crew that was outsiders in Firefly. One of the things that I was intrigued by was when the revitalized Doctor Who toyed with this idea of being alone, of being the last one in an intriguing way. When the Doctor was the last of the Time Lords, the last remaining Time Lord, because of a genocidal war with the Daleks. But then the show stepped back from this by bringing back the Time Lords in a rather contrived way. As a character who is alone, as a character who is separated, cut off from his culture and from his society, Spock then tries to find family and connection among the Earthlings on the Enterprise. But even there, he's an outsider. Now, the crews of Star Trek have often functioned more like families than I think what you'd expect a crew of a starship would act like. Spock as a character represents what a lot of us feel. We often feel alone. We are often other in our own family. Some of us struggle in family because we're not like everyone else. It is a weird sense of both connection and loneliness that many of us struggle with our families. And I think Spock represents that. I think that's one of the reasons why we connect with Spock. Spock is the only main cast member who isn't a human. Now, for the 1960s, Star Trek was groundbreaking in its diversity. To have Nichelle Nichols and George Takei on the bridge as regular quasi-main characters. But by today's standards, Star Trek really isn't that diverse. If you look at the show today, it really feels like there are these few token minorities on the bridge and in the crew. Spock is the only non-human regular character. I mean, even the aliens in Star Trek mostly look like humans. The Enterprise, which is a flagship of the Federation, is often referred to in the original series as an Earth vessel. That the Federation, while being this organization, this institution that involves multiple and includes multiple worlds and planets and cultures and alien species, appears to be mostly really to be about the humans. There's more diversity when it comes to aliens in the Mos Eisley Cantina of Star Wars than there is in all of the original series of Star Trek. And so Spock, as an outsider, as an observer, studies and sometimes struggles to understand humans. Even though part of him is human, even though he has human emotions, Spock does not always understand why people do the things they do around him. Now, Star Trek successfully repeated this dynamic, this formula, in The Next Generation with Data, who is a 24th century Pinocchio, the android who dreams of becoming like a human, but is often confused and perplexed by the strange behavior of the humans around him. And yet, I don't think we can just simply look at Spock and say that he is the loneliest Vulcan in the universe. He does eventually find family. Even though he is an outsider, even though he doesn't quite always fit in, even though that the humans are weird and perplexing, Spock does find family there. Even though the rest of the crew is human, they have all sacrificed home and family. And so as they're traveling through the universe, through the galaxy, this crew finds family with each other. And Spock becomes one of the central figures of that family. As Spock tells Kirk in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, when he gives command of the Enterprise to Admiral Kirk, and Admiral Kirk feels bad about it, Spock says, "You are my superior officer. You are also my friend. I have been and always shall be yours." Thank you, Leonard Nimoy, for all that you have done for us, for the many years of enjoyment, of making real a character like Spock that so many of us could identify with and love and enjoy. Rest in peace. If you like Geek Cross, please leave us a review on iTunes. You can find Geek Cross on Facebook and Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @GeekCrossShow. You can also email us at geekcrossshow@gmail.com. Geek Cross is a McLaren production. My name is Jeremy Yoder. Thanks for listening.